I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement. Everything I do so instinctive.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, degenerate sleuths of the night. We gather to boldly go where others have refused. Welcome to the DT show, you salty mofos.
A man accused of killing 4 college students is behind bars and he has ties to northeastern and central Pennsylvania. State police say 28-year-old Brian Koberger was arrested this morning in a home in Chestnut Hill Township.
I can't find any case law that would support that idea. That somehow a warrant would be needed for DNA left at a crime scene.
We are expecting to learn more about the allegations against the girlfriend of a Boston police officer who was found unresponsive in the snow Saturday morning. I-Team sources say Karen Reed was in a relationship with John O'Keefe. She's facing charges including motor vehicle homicide and manslaughter.
So, the Commonwealth just provided the court with information that causes me grave concern. The implications of that information may have profound effects on this defense and defense counsel.
So, get your popcorn ready and your choice of drink. Get your butt on your seat. Like, comment, and subscribe for a treat. Here we go. It's time for the show. The Drunk Turkey Show.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the DT show. I'm Daniel. Nobody's with me, actually. Just you guys. Hopefully our mods and members and everybody else in between. Hope you guys are having a fantastic week. Football is about to start here in about an hour and 10 minutes. So that's about the length of this podcast is going to be. Maybe a little bit shorter than that. We'll see. Depends on how much stuff we go through. Depends on how much stuff we get through. I don't anticipate this being a very long one, to be 110% honest with you, given the fact that we're going to go through the documents. We're talking about the disappearance of Lilly and Jack Sullivan out of Nova Scotia. Sorry about that. And we're going to go back into the documents referencing this case. And so without further ado, let's bring it up. And like I said, I don't think much of this stuff here is what's what I'm looking for. It's a lot of repetitive stuff, in all these documents. It wasn't like a series of 500 documents or whatever it was. I don't think I got all 500, but it wasn't like a series of 500 documents, and each one was individually different from the rest. Many of them had a good piece of them as part of the documents. And so I want to say about out of the 41 pages here, 30 pages are repetitive in almost every one of these documents. It's the same exact story and the same exact everything, the layout, who said what. It's mainly the statements that were given by Janie, by Daniel, and by Maleyha that we already read last time. So I'm sure if you guys are watching, you're tuning in. If you haven't seen the first one that we did a couple nights ago, when it was titled that RCMP actually clears Daniel and Maleyha of a criminal crime so far. I mean, they cleared them of any criminal. What's the word that they used? I'm gonna see if I can find it real quick. I have it here. I want to say it's like on 24, something like that. Yep, 24. So it was of a criminal investigation and the criminal nature of the crime. Now, I know there's been a lot of people, and I've seen it in my comment section. Oh, they don't necessarily clear them, Daniel. They don't clear them. I saw one person tell me that they read the entire documents and didn't see that they cleared them. Well, let's just go one more time. They did a polygraph test. Up until this point, there was a lot of investigation that had gone into Daniel and Maleyha. At this point, they looked at their bank records, they looked at their phones, they looked at everything within that encompassed their phones, their text messages, their locations, their GPS. They allowed searches on the house and property. They were interrogated multiple times, and again, did a polygraph test. And so they had a lot of background going into the polygraph test on what they were looking for. And so if we were to just kind of take a quick gander at this, and we're only going to look at it just a brief moment, because there's some folks that didn't apparently watch the entire broadcast last night. At the end is where we talked about that they were cleared. And so let's see. Right here, it says here that Daniel, this is about the polygraph examination. Daniel's polygraph examination procedure was truthful. They had 4 questions. And right here after it's blanked out. But here it didn't black it out. It says she was found to be truthful. And then it says when answering the following questions. It's 4 questions. I don't know if they're the same 4 questions. I don't think so. But it seems like their target of questions that they're going to ask pertaining to the investigation was 4. So that doesn't necessarily mean that they asked them the same 4 questions. It just means that they had 4 questions pertaining to the core subject, which was when it came to, it doesn't say for Daniel. I think it just says for the indicated he was truthful. I want to say it was for taking, he says, so coming from him, the questions surrounded on taking the lives of the children. With Maleyha, it says here that they wanted to, and look at this, an effort to eliminate her as a suspect. All right, so this is the first hint that this is them clearing them. I know a lot of people don't want to see this and a lot of people don't want to read this, but the entire purpose of this was an effort to eliminate as a suspect. Now, clearing somebody isn't necessarily a law enforcement term, right? This is a media term. Law enforcement doesn't ever say, hey, flat out, we cleared this person or that person. Just like in the Brian Koberger case, whether it was Hoodie Guy, Jack Decor, the persons who ended up being Hunter Johnson, and the other individuals that showed up that morning. If you go back and you look at all the debriefings that Moscow Police Department released when they talked about clearing, and again, that's a term that the media uses, which I consider myself part of the media. They say that they don't believe, or that they have no reason to believe that they're involved. They've been eliminated as suspects. These are the terms that you hear from law enforcement. It's never really the term clear. Oh, they've been cleared, or especially in anything official. Perhaps in an interview, perhaps, speaking to a reporter, but not on anything official. It's always going to be eliminated as a suspect. Do not believe to have any involvement. 0 grounds to believe that this person was involved. Those are the type of terms that you're looking for. And I know that there was a few people who were trying to say that it was irresponsible of me to say that they were cleared because they read the documents. Your misunderstanding of the documents is not my irresponsibility, for one. And 2, these are the terms that law enforcement use. So in an effort to eliminate her as a suspect in causing the children's disappearance and possible murder. So they wanted to look at a couple of different aspects when they were talking to Maleyha. And so you have this term here, eliminate as a suspect. And then you have the investigator's comments, which says at this point of the investigation, Jack and Lily's disappearance is not believed to be criminal in nature. Do not have a reasonable grounds to believe a criminal offense occurred. A polygraph examinations were conducted with the intention of ruling out that possibility. So the entire thing that they were trying to conclude with the polygraph, because they've already gotten all of the information, they've already gotten all the evidence, they've spoken to them, they've had interrogations, they've picked up their phones, they've gotten permissions to go through their text messages, bank records, financial stuff, GPS locations, search the house. They have not lawyered up. All those things they have investigated and looked into. This was the last piece of, piece that they needed to cross, the last I that needed dotted, the last T that needed crossed, to determine with the intention of eliminating them as suspects. And they passed. So if you don't believe that that is them being cleared, that's on you. Right? But in the end, they've already cooperated with everybody that they need to cooperate. They've spoke to them as often as they possibly can. Law enforcement has not come out and said that either party, whether it was Maleyha or Daniel, that neither one of them have been uncooperative, have denied any statements, have denied coming in, have denied searching of the house, have denied searching of the phone or turning it over, requiring warrants for those things. Now, they do have to have warrants because, you want to cover your tail, so to speak. And they do get the warrants, and we're going to go through some of those warrants. But as we also read through those documents, we're going to find out that a lot of that stuff, even though they got a warrant for, was turned over voluntarily. So, there you go. And you may disagree, but you're also disagreeing with law enforcement who know a lot more than me, a lot more than you, and a lot more than anybody else that's online talking all this nonsense back and forth. And I include myself in that because I'm not part of the investigation. I've never said I was, a part of this investigation. I am a commentator in this investigation. I talk about the investigation. I don't try to solve it. Now, I will come up with thoughts and theories about it because that's, a lot of people come here for that. But I'm not a detective. Neither are you. You're not going to solve it. I'm not going to solve it. Law enforcement have way more information than any of us do. And if you believe otherwise, or you believe that the secret code of something that law enforcement haven't already looked into, I recommend getting a microphone and a camera and putting yourself out there. Let's hear it. And if you're that spot on, I'm sure the RCMP, the FBI, if you're in the States, local law enforcement will notice your talent and pick you up as an investigator in no time. So without further ado, with that out of the way, let's get into what it is that they investigated that we haven't even spoken to yet. All right. So this is referencing, I'm in the wrong one. Let's go to the first one. The first one are items seized. So on this says all documents related to a report to a justice dated May 26, 2025, be sealed in a packet and kept in custody. The court is in place with no public access. And so there was apparently something that was seized. It goes on to say the items listed, and this is all edited and redacted, but it goes on to say the items listed on the report to a justice signed on May 26, 2025 were seized between May 2nd and May 7th. Herein referred to as items will afford evidence in respect to the investigation. Doesn't necessarily go into what evidence was seized. Given the time frame, it could be a series of things. I know that Daniel and Maleyha and Janie, they turned over things like toothbrushes and stuff like that for the kids, so that the DNA tests or DNA, getting getting a STR profile of their DNA on file. So that way, if something were to come up or if they were to find something that has DNA on it, they can go back and have something to compare it to see if they're going, traveling up the right path, so to speak. It goes on to say the items listed on the report to a justice dated May 26, 2025 were seized either in plain view doctrine or by consent from the residents of Daniel Martell, where Jack and Lilly Sullivan were reported missing from, or from the wooded area surrounding the residence that was searched by police and volunteer ground search and rescue teams. So based off of that, it also tells me that, they had a search. I know that Daniel, they allowed, I know a lot of people were like, whoa, maybe not at first, maybe not at second. They allowed law enforcement to go in there and search, and law enforcement searched, and they picked up things, as I mentioned. From it also to say from the wooded area surrounding the residence, that tells me this is probably referencing the pink blanket as well. May 26, 2025, I'm not sure what would I'll be, what's the significance of that date? If that would tell us anything as far as what type of justice all these things were turned into. And so let's see, it says, I hereby request that all information relating to the insurance issuance and sealing of the report to justice submitted on May 26, 2025 shall be placed in a sealed packet to which shall be kept in custody of the provincial court of province of Nova Scotia in a place where the public has no access for indefinite period of time. Conclusion, there are no other investigator has obtained or has made any applications in attempt to obtain any warrants to search with respect to the investigation that have been refused. Basically, what that means is they haven't had a warrant for anything because somebody refused something. And it sounds like basically what I've been trying to say is that everybody that's involved here has been cooperating fully. They've been, when things have been asked, it's been turned over. And it appears sometimes that things have been turned over before they're even asked. I think that Daniel wanted to make sure that he wasn't that they could rule him out as a suspect so they can try to move along and find the kids and focus in on the search aspect of it. And so I don't know this for sure, but I think I've read this in a couple places that he had gone to them and said, here's my phone, here's my stuff. You can look through it. And so it seems like that is accurate based on that, that description there, that they've not needed to get a warrant because of refusal. So, yeah, interesting point there. Who planted the pink blanket? I mean, that's a good question. How did it get there? That's the real question. How did the pink blanket get there? I don't know. Dina Reiner comes in with being the newest YouTube member. Thank you, Dina. I appreciate you. Where the pink blanket came from and how it got there is a confusing situation. This case does not come without its red flags. And I understand, and I've told this to everybody that I've spoken to. I understand 100% why people looked in their direction. I 100% get it. In fact, had I been looking at this case in real time, I too would have been there with you guys on that, aspect. I too would have been like, hey, they missed school for a couple days and then they show up missing. That's weird, But then we find out that there's video of the kids the day before. So as weird as it is, it doesn't mean that they were missing during that time. In fact, there's proof to say otherwise. And so for me, I don't harp on those things. I don't stay with that on the things that have been disproven. It's been disproven now that the kids didn't go missing before Thursday at 2:15 or whatever it was, 2:45 p.m. when they were seen on video. They weren't missing before then. As suspicious as it may be that they didn't go to school and that all these other things were going around at that time, and that there was a possibility at one time there was a possibility that they could have gone missing earlier, I too would have been like, that's weird. But I follow the evidence. And as the evidence came in and video surveillance comes in and you see that there's proof of life the day before, I don't harp on the things that have been debunked and disproven. That's not what I do here. And so, if some people consider that keeping an open mind is to consider things that have been debunked, I don't think that's keeping an open mind. In fact, I think that's keeping a closed mind, because you don't want to move on from your opinion solely based on the fact that it's been disproven. It's and you don't want to be wrong. It's everybody's wrong. I've been wrong before on multiple things. I've been more right though. Especially when it comes to these cases. All righty. Let's see. The bear got it, everyone. Got what? Kids get bruised. Yeah, that's true. Kids do get bruised. That's the other thing too. I mean, there are some things. Kids had bruises here and there. They do get bruised. Natural playing. My daughter has some bruises on her legs right now because she likes to jump on her toys and jump back and sit down hard on things. And it's she's active. She's 2 years old. She's super active. Doesn't mean that anybody's abusing her or anything like that. And in this scenario here, I can't say for sure. I'm not there. I don't know Lily and Jack's situation with their parents, but solely just on the bruising aspect. Okay, you know, they had them, and it was suspicious. It was a red flag, right? But again, kind of with everything else, like, all right, how does that equal to them losing their lives because of some sort of abuse? Was the bruises based off of an abuse? You know, there was an investigation done by CPS apparently before the disappearance. What was the outcome? You know, did they look into, you know, a lot of people look in the fact that there's an investigation, but not what the outcome was. You know, was it closed by the time the disappearance occurred? And was it something that was I think Daniel mentioned something to do with educational thing or something of that nature. If it was something to do with that, you know, a learning, I think it was, is what he said. Which, I mean, I don't know about CPS up there, but in here in the United States, I know of a situation where this one person, their child needed to be in special ed classes, but the parent didn't want the child to be there. They were a little bit old school, the parents, and so they were aware of the negative stigma from when they were in school about what special ed was, and the principal for that school, and I know this because they had to have a conversation with her because it's not illegal. She ended up filing a report on the parents with CPS because the parents didn't want the child in special ed. But here in Texas, that's by law, that's an option. You can't force a child to take those services. And so, you know, they filed it, and just because they filed it, it still had to be investigated. Those parents still had to be talked to and stuff like that. I know who the parents are personally. It wasn't anything that I was involved in, like as far as investigating. I was never involved in like child protective services or anything like that. I was never a CPS or anything like that. But I knew who the parents were personally. They'd reached out to me because they thought it was wrong that this had occurred, and were asking me, hey, you know, can they do this? What is this going to happen? You know, those type of things. I got a lot of those calls from a lot of my friends when I was in law enforcement. Hey, this happened, especially if anything happened, I always got those calls. And so, yeah, I'm aware of those situations. I don't know if it's different out there. I don't know if it's the exact same situation. But I just want to say that those scenarios do pop up. And here in Texas, that was dropped, but it doesn't mean that an investigation didn't happen. It doesn't mean that, and just because an investigation happens doesn't mean that something came out of it. So I don't know the answers to those questions. Unfortunately, Canada is a little bit harder than the United States to get documents and things of that nature. And so, you know, to be 110% honest with you, it's just speculation one way or the other on a bunch of it. And, you know, you then have to focus in on, all right, who would have access to this? Who would know about all these things? Well, if law enforcement was having an investigation into the parents, I'm fairly positive they would have access to those type of things. And I'm going to assume that they were aware, and they probably pressed Daniel about it. You know, Daniel popped in on the live chat the last time we were, you know, here talking about this case, and he mentioned he had a 4-hour interrogation. So they were really pushing him. They were trying to get him to break, and, you know, those type of things. They probably came, you know, you don't have a 4-hour conversation with without a lot of information. Right. So they probably went in there prepared, knew a lot of history, knew a lot of things that were going on, and they probably try to utilize those things against them. And so just food for thought. All right. I've been rambling on for a while, and we haven't even gotten much into this. So this one here is the next one's on the forensic cell phone. So this is a document. It goes on to say, upon being satisfied, having considered the application that access to copies of records requested, and then records of types of those requested are in the possession and control of the following: forensic analysis, RCMP digital forensic services as well. And so this was all about the phones. It says RCMP digital forensic services will, to the extent possible, conduct an examination of forensic images already made of Maleyha and Daniel's phones and isolate the following from the full image. Now, I was a little bit, and I think this is a little bit of a language thing, right? Well, they go into it about images, But I think because images sounds different for me, because when I think of images, I'm thinking they just took like screenshots of certain things, of text messages and stuff like that. What it means is documents, and these documents that they have been able to save from the phone, they pull them up as, I guess, images or photos or whatever. But it's just, it doesn't appear that they're just basic images like screenshots. It's a little bit more than that. It's just, I think it's a little bit different a little different when it comes to the language barrier here. Sometimes words can be used a little bit differently in different places. It goes on to say, the following stored data between May 1st and May 2nd, and this is between 2:25 p.m. on the 1st and 10:27 a.m. And this is during the time that the kids were last seen and reported missing. So they looked up electronic communications, audio, web browsing history, programs, logs, and application data, telephone and other electronic communication records, including without limiting generally of the foregoing records related to signals from wireless devices, cell phone records, inbound and outbound text messaging records, internet browsing history, location data, and this is using global position system tracking records, so GPS off the phone. So, when we talked about, for instance, the Brian Kober case, and they were talking about using pings and this and that, looking for advanced call records and trying to use locations off of those things. Well, Brian Koberger had his phone off, and he had some other things that he was had on his phone that he was doing kind of weird. But there was evidence of that, because there was missing data, there was missing information. And so law enforcement, when they looked into it, they could tell that he was doing something. And unfortunately, a lot of the stuff he was doing, because he was factory resetting his phone and doing a bunch of other things, a lot of data was lost. I don't think Daniel went through that same process of what Brian Koberger did on his phone. And if he did, there would be evidence of it. And, lack of evidence is evidence. If you go into somebody's phone and it is completely wiped, between a specific date and time, and during that date and time, 2 different dates, something nefarious happens, that's what you call a red flag. That's an instance of something kind of shady. But if there's nothing there, and there's nothing missing that you would expect to not be missing, then it probably means it wasn't tampered with, right? And so here in this situation, because it doesn't appear that Daniel went through the efforts that Brian Koberger did to wipe his phone, that they were able to utilize Daniel and Maleyha's GPS tracking records from their phones, from the chip itself, which is a lot more accurate. I mean, I think we're talking about 6 feet when it comes to the accuracy on those things. Burner phones, maybe. So when did they get the burner phones, right? Let's break it down. So the last time that they were seen was at 2:25 on video. They called 911 at 10 o'clock the next day. So you're looking at 19 and a half hours or so of time when something happened. Now, if they utilize these burner phones because of the crime itself, it's a little, there would have to be proof of purchase of those phones. They probably would have happened within the 19 hours. And it just kind of honestly doesn't make a lot of sense, to be honest with you, when it comes to, they must have had burner phones at the time. I don't think so. Because if something happened, it's most likely something that happened in the moment, right? Whether it was an accident or somebody got mad and lost control, or whatever the case you want to call it. It doesn't seem like in this scenario, it would line up to something premeditated, right? It seems like it would have been an accident. And so when you have something that is not premeditated, there's usually not any or a lot of forethought about the crime, because if there was, and that would make it premeditated, obviously, right? And so when it's not a premeditated crime, there's a lot of steps that are missed, so to speak, because they're not anticipating committing a crime and covering tracks for that crime that they have no intention of committing. So I highly doubt that there would be a burner phone or those things. Good thought. And that's what I like to do. What I do on the channel is somebody throw out a possibility, and then we'll work that possibility from all angles and see if it's feasible or plausible, or if it makes sense. And and if Daniel had a burner phone for whatever reason, I mean, having a burner phone and stuff, especially out there, where you have to connect to the Wi-Fi for internet and things of that nature, it wouldn't be that difficult to figure out if there was another phone that was constantly connected to the area. When you do your geofencing and you're looking at the call events, timing records for the phones in the area, to notice one in the area. I mean, there's a lot of things that you can do to rule out. Like, I know a lot of folks have this pre-notion that if they didn't physically see law enforcement do it, that they didn't investigate it. And that's far from the truth. Let's see. They go on to say that all stored data related to address books, passwords, encryption keys needed to access any of the data set out in paragraph A, data relating to ownership, possession, and access or use of control of the device or its data relating to its configuration of the device's system and programs. Any stored data that has no date associated to it, including deleted or recovered data, and falls within the categories of set out paragraph. In order to gain access to these items and search for described above, a member of a DFS unit will use the full forensic image of each device already extracted to compile a report containing only named items within the full forensic image. Affidavit goes on to say, and it talks a little bit about where it just says that, the kids went missing, and Maleyha called the report of missing at 10:01 a.m. It says here on May 6th and May 8th, images were taken off of Maleyha Brooks Murray and phone, and Jack and Lily's stepfather, Daniel Martell. Those records are currently located at the RCMP Digital Forensic Services. And here in the next few documents, as more information comes out, they actually talk more about what happens with these phone records. You know what I'm saying? And so they actually get them, they review them, and they've had them there. It says here on May 6th, Maleyha provided her phone to police and signed a consent for it to be searched. So this is, again, cooperation. It was not needed a warrant. They didn't need a warrant for it. They didn't force her to give it. This was a signed by consent. And then on May 7th, 2025, Daniel did the same. So he went in there and signed off and gave his phone freely. There was no debate about it. There was no lawyering up. There was no uncooperative measures behind it. It goes on to say on May 9th, RCMP Digital Forensic Services provided the Northeast Nova MCU with the images of their phones and the USB, and the phones were returned to them. So they've already, by May 9th, and this is, I think, around the time when they started doing the polygraph tests and stuff. But around May 9th is when everything was completed. They gave them back on a USB drive everything that they needed. Goes on to say, this one thing, I don't know if I had picked it up last time, but in the conversations with Maleyha, it says here that on May 4th, or on May 2nd, May 3rd, and May 4th, she did speak with law enforcement, Maleyha, about Jack and Lily going missing. And she says that Lily came into the room blank a couple of times. And so Daniel said that Lily went into the room. I know a lot of people were questioning whether Maleyha had seen it or not. It appears that was to be the case. And the rest of this stuff, guys, is stuff we've already read all over again. Polygraph and the statements that we read last time. So fortunately, because it's repetitive, there's not a lot that we got to go back and forth for. So cell phone, cell phone information seizure and return to Maleyha and Daniel's phone. Goes on to say that on May 6th at 9:20, Maleyha gave her phone to an officer via consent form. At 11:22, her phone was given to forensic analysis Giles. And on May 7th at 9:47, Daniel gave his phone also the same way through the consent form. signed for it, and allowed the complete imagery of all data and information contained on the phone. On May 9th, they received the information back from DHS and the USBs provided for the investigation team. And once they got it back, it says here that it will not take long to do this because the timeline is short and he can do it in the weekend or then early next week. So they had all this information very early on. So the summary goes on to say on May 2nd, 10:01, Lilly and Jack Sullivan were reported missing by their mother. She reported they walked away from their home and could not be located. Kind of the same stuff we've heard from before. Because I believe the records access, and this is referencing the cell phone, under the Missing Persons Act, obtain copies of limited access to records related to the missing persons. Lilly Sullivan and Jack Sullivan will assist the RCMP Northeast Nova Major Crime Unit in locating the missing persons provided by independent verification of information provided to police by Maleyha Brooks Murray and Daniel Martell, possibly containing information that may create new investigative leads in the event that Brooks Murray and Daniel Martell overlooked information in the timeline of events they provided. So they looked into them. Now, one of the things that people might say is, oh, well, there's still something to be investigating. If they found something, I mean, this is where we put context clues together. If they found something, they would continue to talk to them more and more. It seems like they've talked to them less and less because there's less information to give them. And so it seems like it's going the other way around, which kind of coincides with what I've been saying as far as I don't think that the parents had I think they got cleared. Goes on to say here, application for sealing order to protect information pursuant to the common law authority. There's still an investigation. There's still investigative avenues remaining within the investigation, and the investigation may process to a criminal investigation should the elements of a criminal offense be identified. And so this is a key part, right? They say here that if criminal offense may be identified, that they could progress to a criminal investigation. And so this was written when they were getting the information for the cell records. And after they've done the polygraph, they no longer believe there to be criminal nature and do not have reasonable grounds to believe the criminal offense have occurred. And the polygraph examinations were conducted with the intent of ruling out that possibility. What that possibility is of a crime and criminal offenses being occurred. They've ruled that out. That was the full intent. Again, the investigation, polygraph examination in relation to this investigation in an effort to eliminate her as a suspect causing her children's disappearance and possible murder. So after they got all the information, they got all the evidence, the phone and everything else, all they had left was the lie detector test. And they wanted to eliminate her as a suspect. And after she was done, she passed. Her and Daniel both. So they no longer believe it's criminal in nature. No reasonable grounds to believe a criminal offense has occurred. And this was all done with the intention of ruling out the possibility of a criminal offense and a crime happening. Which the results were they were truthful. It may not be spelled out, I guess, CLEAR, but everything's there to see that's what it means. Oh, it goes more. It's not just the polygraphs, interviews, phone cell, no criminal offense. Yes. But it also goes into bank records and other things. And the reason why the bank records are important is because, people were claiming that he was selling or buying things. Well, they were talking about the things that they went and purchased. They got their receipts. They got everything. In fact, Daniel actually had made some most of the purchases through his debit card and whatnot. And so if they found something there, you'd probably see something there. Now, I know that a lot of people might end up saying, well, Daniel, but what about cash purchases and stuff like that? Okay, that's true. There still then would be the cell phone stuff, the communication aspect. Who's buying, who's selling, who's coming up to pick up. Where are those text messages? Where's that communication? Don't seem like there's any of those things. None of those dots are connecting. You know what I'm saying? And again, if they had those things, then they would have other reasons to investigate this as a criminal offense. But with everything that they've cooperated with, not one thing has come out that has leaned law enforcement to consider a criminal investigation at this point. And that's, that must be telling, I guess, especially for them. Okay, let's see. One second. I just want to check on something real quick. All right. Okay, and so this one is the cell phone update, and this is actually referencing some hidden information. And by hidden, it's just redacted. It says records of types of these requests in the possession under the control of the following. It's redacted. It's from Montreal. I'm assuming that this is going to be either more banking information and or phone information, possibly even those advanced call records, because there's a statement in there about 13 months is how long they keep the records for. And it kind of made me feel like that was an advanced timing record, because that's kind of how long some of the places, like your major, like AT&T, Verizon, and things of that nature, they hold them for that length now. I know in the Brian Covert case, it used to be 7 days back in 2022, but in 2025, I think it's 13 months. So I think that's what it is referenced to. Yeah, our mods are great. Thank you, mods, for being so amazing and keeping everything clean in here. Records and types of those requested are the possession of those in the control of somebody in Montreal. And then it goes, the following records are authorized to be accessed. Any records not listed, and doesn't say much. So it says record required in relation to, and it's redacted. But there are some context clues that we can go through. Let's see. Previous application. So this is the stuff before. This is where it kind of gets back into the cell phones. It says on May 16th, I presented an application for records access to the cell phones. Records for Maleyha Brooks and Daniel Martell. The order has been executed and the results have been received. On May 17th, I presented an application for records access for school bus surveillance, and those have been executed and received as well. And so everything else is pretty much what we've talked about before. Now it goes back into what a bunch of this undisclosed stuff is, and we can kind of pinpoint a little bit about what it is. It goes on to say on May 21st, I had a conversation with some employee. This employee, I'm assuming his employer is located at somewhere in Montreal. They said that they can process whatever this request is in 7 days. Sounds like a business. On May 21st, 2025, I was in conversation with some other employee. Again, this is business related. They are located in Toronto. They said it was not sure how long it would take for the request to be processed, but said it usually takes a few days to compile. I know from applying for previous applications so it sounds like this is an application of some sort of warrant. So I'm leaning towards phone information and banking is where I'm at. On May 20th, they completed something. May 21st, 23rd, they communicated with the employees by email and telephone. One employee located in Toronto stated that blank are kept for 13 months. And that's what I was saying when I thought maybe it was the advanced timing records. You know what I'm saying? And so it goes on to say, and they said they worked on the request urgently and provided the results as soon as they could. Provided the results of the blank on May 21st. I had a conversation with, I'm assuming this is another employee. This employee is located in Halifax, and they retain information for a period of 6 months. Does not require blank, just a civic address or GPS coordinates. And that's kind of why, another reason why I was thinking maybe this had to do with something with the phone, because there's some GPS coordinates that are involved here. But I mean, I'm just speculating 100%. I have no idea. You know, it sounds like it's one or the other, phone or banking. It will take blank at least 2 days to process the request, but they will get it done as soon as they can. And that's it for this one. The next one is some more records, and everything was exactly the same as the last one, but this one, instead of starting off with the other city, this one starts off with Toronto. And everything is exactly the same. Into the summary. So he goes back in, I believe, speaking to blank employees as stated in paragraph 44, 45, 46, 47, that the records exist specifically. Now, this also could be like a store, you know, and they could be trying to get some records from purchase records, you know, those type of things. It could be a lot of things. And then it has here Montreal, Toronto. So it's exactly the same as the last. And then we get into the banking. This one's from Halifax. So, like I said, that was the other clue. I was like, all right, so this is in the same place as some of the other documents we're mentioning. So it could be banking, and this one's referencing banking. Banking documents and information being held in the office of blank relating to the accounts, whether held individually or jointly and held in the name of Daniel Robert Martell. These shall include records associated with the account holder and the account number, more specifically the following records. And a bunch of different things, from account transactions, financial information, account opening documentation, client profiles, etc., etc., etc. Goes on to say, in relation to blank, banking documents and information being held at the offices of blank relating to the accounts, whether held individually or jointly, held in the name of Daniel Martell. So this is another bank. And then it goes to another one in relation to blank and blank, banking documents and information held at the offices of blank and blank, relations to whether held individually or jointly, held in the name of Daniel Martell. So it sounds like he's got a few bank accounts that they were looking at. Maybe one's a credit card. One could be like a debit card, a checking account. You know, it could be I know some people might look at that and say, oh, he has several different bank accounts. That must be odd. I don't think so. I mean, it could be a credit card, could be his bank. You know, it could be a lot of different things. And he may have a savings account with his mom or something. So, or some other family member or he may have a savings account that he started for his other kids, and that's blank and blank. I have zero idea, 100% speculation, but they have access to all of his banking accounts. So if they found something nefarious amongst them, they had access to them. They were looking at all of them. The way the redacted stuff can be used for evidence, FYI. The way the redacted stuff reads is stuff that's not, it's either personal information or stuff that's unfounded. You know, you'll have things where they'll talk about, for instance, what time they heard Lilly was there. Daniel and Maleyha, they have separated since this, which is a good thing for law enforcement. You want to keep them separated. You don't want them talking to each other. You don't want them coming up with a story. Because if somebody goes out there and commits a crime and they end up trying to get away with it, one of the major components is they have to have a pretty solid, tight story for each other. That's not the case here. They're going back and forth and they're turned on each other. They've not necessarily said, oh, they had something to do with it, but they've talked about their suspicions of certain things. And law enforcement has looked into it. So this has been a law enforcement dream as far as what you want. You want your suspects to be separated. You don't want them talking to each other. and those things. And so because of that, there's a little bit of some things that aren't going to be exactly the same. And I think that you have Maleyha saying like at 9 something in the morning is when she heard, let's just say it's 9:20. Let's just say he says 9:35. So it doesn't necessarily match up. Right. And so they've left those things blank. I've talked to Daniel about some of the things that he has spoken to law enforcement. And he's told me that everything that he's seen that's blacked out are the things that he's talked about when it comes to his suspicions. And so to me, that felt like it was more so information that was unfounded. There was no evidence. It was more speculation than anything else, and or debunked information. And so I don't think that the redacted stuff is anything that's going to turn around into some criminal investigation. I don't see that 100% at all. Most of it is personal information. Some of it is like the bank. Like it doesn't want to give us the name of the banks that they use. Doesn't want to give us the name of some of the stores that they've purchased items at. Those type of things. So I don't at all believe that any of the redacted stuff is some kind of secret information that is being withheld because it's part of a criminal investigation. 100% do not believe that at all. But I understand why some may think that. Let's see. And so here it goes. Banking documents and information held at the offices of blank relating to the accounts, whether individually or jointly held in the name of Maleyha Brooks Murray. So let's go to page 42. I like that I wrote these things in here. So then it goes again into Maleyha and Daniel's phone review. On May 16th, I submitted and was granted an application for records, access, order, and forensic images of Maleyha and Daniel's phone dated May 1st, 2025 at 2:25 p.m., where the children were last seen on video surveillance at the Dollarama. And so that's the last point of life. Like I mentioned before, I know a lot of people will look at the kids missing school on Monday or on Tuesday and Wednesday as some sort of possibility of them being missing before then. Law enforcement doesn't look at it that way either. They're seeing the last time that they were seen alive, and that was at 2:25 p.m. And so that's where they're focusing their efforts as far as, all right, this is the last proof of life. And then to May 2nd, 2025 at 10:27 p.m. And that's when law enforcement arrived to pick up the actual report of a missing persons. That's when they arrived. So that's your time frame. And I've been saying that for a while now. It says here, and it goes on to say, when police arrived at 1407 Gairloch Road to investigate the disappearance. The images were received from Digital Forensic Services and reviewed. May 22nd, 2025, CST Robinson reviewed the forensic phone images of Maleyha and Daniel's phone for the above time frame. The following is a summary. And so it's privileged information. It just says right there, meaning it's private information. It's so there's nothing. It's not that it's anything nefarious. It's just private information. And they have that information there for both of them. On May 26th, a review of the GPS coordinates associated with Maleyha and Daniel's phones. And they got everything listed there. And so on June 16th, I received an email from Analysis Stephen Carter detailing his review. And he completed a search on, and a lot of that is redacted and privileged information. Goes on to say banking information. On June 4th, 2025, I reviewed Daniel Maleyha's forensic phone images and attempted to determine who they bank with. Following is the summary from Maleyha, and they had a few, or at least one. On June 10th, 2025, I had a conversation with blank and blank at the blank. And this is so-and-so is a regional senior manager for Atlantic and the blank corporate investigative services. Confirmed Daniel had an active account with them, I'm assuming. And they are in Halifax as well. So this is what I'm assuming was some of the information that they were looking for that was redacted earlier, which was banking information. On June 10th, 2025, I had a conversation by email with corporate security. Corporate security confirmed Daniel Martell with the date of birth has accounts with such and such. And this is in Toronto. So another date that we were looking at earlier, or another location, that we were looking at earlier when it came to some hidden redacted stuff, looks like it had to do with banking. Because the time frame for banking records from Martell related to his accounts with blank between April 2nd and May 2nd will show financial transaction history and patterns for a month leading up to the disappearance of the children. This will allow investigators to verify statements to police and confirm other statements obtained about blank. In addition, it will show if there were any abnormalities or anomalies, which could provide investigators with further investigative avenues to advance the investigation and assist with locating the children. Bank records from Maleyha Brooks Murray related to her accounts between and the same thing. And the reason they're doing this, they're going back a whole month. Again, this is what I was trying to say. Like, if something happened to these kids, most likely this wasn't a premeditated, they thought about this type of crime and they covered their trail. This was probably either an accident. If they did something, either an accident or something out of the heat of the moment, somebody got mad, somebody was on something, lost control, got into a rage fit, whatever the case may be. It doesn't sound like it's something that is premeditated. And so you would go back and you would look at their, financial records to see if there was anything there, like abnormal payments, purchases. A lot of people were saying things about, they thought Daniel was cooking meth or something of that nature. Well, was he purchasing, the medicines that are required to cook those things, or the chemicals, or whatever the case may be? Those type of things. Also, what you're looking for in his bank records is, if he's got gas receipts going to a certain place, like for instance, he visited this gas station 45 minutes away, on these several different occasions. It could give you an idea of certain things if it fits within the timeline that you have of the 19 hours that they were last seen alive and then reported missing. So, there's a lot of things that you can accomplish with their bank records. And then you can also, you can get the bank records, the cell phone records. You can kind of compare those two as far as like, all right, is his GPS location where, does he go to the store more often than what's on his financial records? Outside of what's on his debit card. If you see his GPS there more often, then you get some financial records from the store. You try to find, get some footage of him in the store. And if he's purchasing things more often than not with cash than his debit card, then maybe you got something there about him selling some stuff, right? But if you're not seeing those things, if you're not seeing these transactions with cash and if his main source of payment and things, if you can, you go through his GPS, right? All right, hey, on this day he went to this place, this restaurant, this store. Is there anything on his financial records that correlate with that? Do they cross? If they do, you have your answer there, right? It's kind of hard also, like, to launder money like that, especially if law enforcement are looking at you and all you're doing is if you're selling dope and then taking that money and then putting it in your bank account. Yeah, it may be small amounts and the bank may not catch it, but if law enforcement starts looking into your financial records and say, hey, this guy deposited, $40 this day, $180 that day, just odd number of deposits, throughout the week, and multiple deposits throughout the week with no answers to where the money came from. Well, you probably got yourself something there. But those are the reasons why you go through the banking records and why you look at those things to determine if there's anything there. And by the sounds of it, based off of the information that they have, they still don't believe that there's a criminal offense or grounds for a criminal incident that occurred. And so lead you to believe that those investigations came back with nothing. And so, just food for thought. And one last thing I wanted to talk about real quick, and I wanted to bring up, because a lot of people have asked me, well, what do you think has happened, Daniel? And then we're going to take some questions for a little bit. What do you think happened? My thing has always been that I felt that they wandered off. We looked at the search. They only did the thermal search and the drone search for half a kilometer distance away from the house. And that's because they ran out of battery and things of that nature. They took many pictures and they got all this information, but it was only a half kilometer. They focused their searches on different areas that they felt were easy for children to get to, but there's a lot of area, in my opinion, based on what these documents indicate, that weren't searched. And I also think that there's a animal component to this. You know, could an animal go out there and actually, you know, take the kids with them and take them further, as they are accustomed of traveling through the woods and the density of it, than what we would assume two kids would walk out to get. And so I got these images here, and this is from May 28th, and this is outside of Daniel and Janie's house. Now, you can barely see something there. Now it's walked right here, so you can see right. Look, if you look right beyond the car right here, you'll see a little black blob. That black blob isn't there right there. It's not there. But this thing continues to move. And you can see him right there. Look how big that boy is. Could be a mama. That's a bear. This is on May 28th. This is on the property. You know, they put a wrench on the door because they were afraid of a bear that was in the area. That's a big bear on their property, in the yard. And so, you know, a bear can take a child quite a bit of distance. I know there's two kids. I would assume a bear that size in the area, there's probably more than one. If that's a mama and there's some cubs around, and if the kids walked off and interacted with a cub, you know, bears act differently around those type of situations. But that is a big bear. I'm not saying that the bear did this or had something to do with it, but they are in the area. And this was May 28th. You know, I'm not you know, my experience with bears goes as far as watching Yogi on TV, but I believe they hibernate throughout the winter and wake up sometime in the spring and in the summertime. I don't know what their eating habits are during what part of the year. But I reckon, given how north this area is, it's probably colder, longer up there than in other parts, especially in the United States. And so there are parts of the United States that are cold into May. You know, shoot, if you go to Lake Tahoe in early June, it's still pretty dang cold out there. You know, ask me how I know. I've been out there. So, yeah, not saying that the bear had anything to do with it, but it could be a possibility, and it could answer why the kids, why maybe there was not much found within the search parameter, you know, from the search area. You know, a lot of people say, could they have gotten further out? This would be one explanation. Now, I don't know. But it's a possibility at the very least. All righty, guys. I'm going to answer a couple of your questions, put a couple stars. We'll be answering them. What's going on, Belinda? Belinda says, I get bears in my yard also. Yeah, but I good to see you. I know the bears are common in some person's yards and stuff. But I know that if you have a mama out there and there's some cubs around, they don't act the same. They don't act the same when there's cubs around and they feel something in danger, you know, those type of things. And so there's still wild animals that, you know, it's not a common thing that a bear does something to a person, but it has happened on a few occasions. But again, I'm not saying that's what happened. I just think that it's a possibility that needs to be not overlooked, in my opinion. And I don't think it happened necessarily there on the property. I think if you look at the pink blanket down the street, and I know some people are asking, well, how does the pink blanket get down there? I mean, it sounds like it was more than one piece of the pink blanket. It sounds like Daniel and Maleyha thought they threw the pink blanket away, which is why they were confused as to why the blanket was out there. Apparently, there was more than one piece of the blanket. And so, was that other piece of the blanket in the trash before it was in the tree, alongside with the piece of blanket that was found in the trash? Or perhaps maybe the kids had it somewhere. You know, kids hide things. You know, kids put things in places. You know, perhaps they had a piece of it somewhere outside that they used, or whatever the case may be, and they took off with it. There's a lot of possibilities there as far as how it ended up where it was. As far as the shoe prints, I think those were relatively close, the boot prints, to where the pink blanket was. I don't think it was like super far away. So it's quite plausible that they did wander off. If there's bears in the areas, a bear could have gotten them at any point when they wandered off, if that's what happened there. But I would suspect that, like I said, I've said it from the beginning, I think that they probably wandered off, maybe got further than where the searches were. And there's a good possibility they went in a different direction than where they assumed they may have gone. I went out to a place in Campwood, and me and Jaime, actually, it was me, Jaime, and my wife, and me and Jaime went out there first, and we were going to go do some fishing and camping and stuff, and my wife had shown up, and we actually I wanted to show them, because I got there earlier. I wanted to show them the river, and it had gotten dark by the time everybody had arrived, and so I was walking them out to the back, and next thing I know, we walked up upon the cabin that was right next to us. And so I was supposed to walk, I'm just going to use random directions. I was supposed to walk south, but I ended up east of where I started. I had no idea we got turned around, none whatsoever. And it was just crazy. And we're like, all right, we're going to wait till the daytime to go back out there. But it was not as dense. It was not as, thick of a forest as where we were compared to what is out here from what I've seen from images. And we were also adults. And so these are kids getting lost out there walking. You know, they could have gone a lot further than people think. They could have gone in a direction that was different than people thought. Just a lot of things, you know what I mean? There are a lot of contributions. I know a lot of people say, oh, they searched and they searched. I mean, there's a lot of searches that have been done that persons didn't get found right away. You know, I bring up Brian Laundrie is one of them. He was out there. They were searching for him for a good week and a half or so before the floods came in and forced them to stop. And then they had to go back out there once the waters went down a little bit. And they still couldn't find him. He ended up being in the exact place where his parents said that he was at. And yet they had all of these searchers and all of these people out there. They couldn't find him. And that place wasn't as dense as this. Different conditions and different things like that. They also had a pretty big, search going on, because this guy was wanted for the possibility of taking the life of his girlfriend, Gabby Petito. And so there was a huge search for that, and so even when they were going for her, when they were looking for her, they were in the area, somewhat of the area, and her body wasn't super hidden or anything like that. And they didn't find her until some RV folks had came out and kind of led them into the direction. And even at that took a long time after they found, I think it was like a few days, if not over a week, between the time that the RV saw the vehicle out there and the time that they actually found her body. It wasn't something that was very quickly. And again, the terrain in the area was a lot less dense than this area out here. And so, and during that search for her, they found other people that had been missing for a long period of time, that had been deceased, that they had searched out there and couldn't find in certain areas. And so, I mean, just to say that, oh, they went out there and they searched and they didn't find anything, must mean that they're not there, is, I don't think is an accurate description of the possibility there, in my opinion. Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I try to be respectful and calm. I don't try to get upset at anybody. Everybody has their opinion. You know, I just don't like, kind of like with Steve Gonsalves and the Gonsalves family, they get a lot of crap because of people that think that Brian Koberger is innocent. You know, I stand up for them because I think that they're great people and they didn't ask for any of this. And you know, here with Daniel and Janie and Maleyha, I've never spoken with Maleyha. If she ever wants to talk to me, she's, you know, my email address is drunkturkeyshow@gmail.com. More than happy to hear you out and put these pieces together and stuff like that. I honestly don't think she had anything to do with it. You know, some of the people that I speak to who are close to this case believe that she knows more than she's saying because of her reactions and her actions. I agree that they're suspicious, but the same thing exists for her as it does for Daniel. You know, she passed a lie detector test. She gave up her phone. She gave up her locations, her bank records. I mean, she's talked to law enforcement 5 separate times. I think Daniel's talked to him less, maybe less occasions, more time. I think he was interrogated for 4 hours at one sitting for once, but I don't know if Maleyha was interrogated for 4 hours during one sitting. But, you know, she did all the same things that Daniel did and still passed all those scenarios. And they found no evidence. So I strongly doubt that she had anything to do with the disappearance of her kids. I think that if there's, and I mentioned it before, there's a guy that lives in the area that has a pretty shady past who was acting kind of weird, you know, didn't want officers on his property or near his property the day that they were searching. And so, you know, that guy, he could accomplish some of the things that would make this a difficult thing to find. His phone records, because they don't have his phone, so it's not like they have the GPS chip like they do for Maleyha and Daniel. It's a little bit different. You know, all they would have is his phone connecting to a tower and perhaps being able to get call advance records, which in that area it sounds like service is a little spotty. So you could be at his house, you could be at Daniel's house, you'd probably be a mile west, east, north, or south, and it would be indistinguishable based on advanced call timing records. And it's not because he's a mastermind or any of those things. It's just service is kind of spotty there, right? Now with Daniel, he doesn't have the luxury of hiding within that realm because he gave up his phone, which had the GPS chip on it, and they were able to locate his locations from that. So different scenario, 100%. But with the other guy too, like, you know, you have to have, if he says no, you can't search. He's not giving up his bank records. I don't think he's taking a polygraph test. So, I mean, he could be an option, but again, that's 100% speculation on my side. I just think the possibility exists. I don't necessarily believe that he 100% did it, which is the reason why I haven't named him. I'm not going to name somebody that I don't know for sure. You know what I mean? But he's got a checkered past. Some of it includes theft. Some of it includes violence. Some of it includes drug use. And so when you mix a lot of those things together, and I found, and some folks might ask, because I've seen it before, how do you know, Daniel, or, you know, Canada doesn't drop all the documents like that? I found the news articles associated with his arrest. So yeah, take that for what it is. I have I have a few news articles that are related to the arrests that he's had and what they were for when he was arrested. So some of it, like I said, has to do with violence. Some of it has to do, a lot of it is theft, and then some of it has to do with possession of a controlled substance. And so if you have somebody who's in somebody's yard on the influence of something that is capable of violence, you know, even if their intention at the moment of entering somebody's yard is to commit a theft, and they see some kids, they're not in the right state of mind because they're under the influence of drugs. You know, those factors could contribute to a possible nefarious outcome, is all I'm trying to say. All right, let's see. A couple of questions I'm going to answer. Put a couple of stars in front of them. If you have questions for me, or if you're talking to me, I'd appreciate it. No more lies, not in Nova Scotia. What lies? It was raining during the initial search for the missing siblings. Maybe that's why they had such a difficult time picking up a scent. You know, I don't know. But it makes sense to me to a certain extent. Is there evidence of actual cadaver dogs were used? I don't know about cadaver dogs, but they used some other type of dogs that were out there to scent for life, I guess. But I don't know if cadaver dogs were used. This 101 says, my cousin went missing from the base, declared AWOL, and had the entire military looking for him. Something got to him in the woods between the barracks and where he worked. His body wasn't found for over a year. Yeah, those things happen, and it's unfortunate. Sorry for your loss there, Miss 101. Oh, no. I fast forward all the way down. I was about to pick up on one. Here it is. Geraldine, let me put this on the big screen so I can read this better. All right. Geraldine Largy was a hiker who went missing off a trail and got lost. Her body was found inside of her tent over 2 years later. Search dogs previously come within 100 yards and didn't alert. I remember this one 100%. I mean, this is like people will look at things and expect a perfect investigation, a perfect search, a perfect everything, and expect the outcome to be perfect. And if it's not, that means something nefarious. This is exactly. Thank you, Chloe, and happy birthday again. I don't know if you caught last night's show. I didn't see you out there, but we wished you a happy birthday. Dan, are you going to drop that info on the neighbor? I can't yet. You know, I don't want to. If this guy didn't do anything either, right? I don't want to be the guy that's putting his information out there so that everybody can go and blame him and he didn't do it. I mean, two things can be true at the same time. The guy can be a complete douche and a thief and a shithead and not have anything to do with anything. You know what I'm saying? Those things all can exist at the same time. But if I find something that points more to another, I think yeah, that would be it. Doesn't Earl have 100 acres? According to Maleyha, he does. I don't know if that's accurate or not, if it's 100 acres exactly, if it's less or whatever the case may be. But from what I understand is he was fully cooperative with law enforcement. But 100 acres is a lot of acreage to search. I mean, just think of that on your own. I mean, if what kind of search would be required for 100 acres of that kind of dense woods? And how many people just to search that? You know what I'm saying? So that's where that is. My question is way back there. I'm a little bit further up. Sorry. Any real truth to Darren saying they're alive, and why is he saying so? So Darren is saying he's alive. He believes, a lot of people do believe these kids are alive and that they're were taken from one form or another, whether it was Maleyha who, and I understand somewhat why. So he believes that the way she was acting, it leads him to believe that there was a possible, like she had something that happened to some. Let me think about it, because I don't want to ruin the way he explained it to me. So Maleyha had been complaining about Daniel for some time beforehand, and they had approached him and told him about some of the complaints. Some of those complaints involved abuse towards Maleyha. So apparently Darren is related to Maleyha and went out there to confront Daniel about this. And Daniel claims that no, it's not true. You know, whatever the claims may be. Now, this wasn't the first time. She had been complaining about wanting to leave for some time. I don't think she liked the situation she was in. I've talked to other people, and also in these documents, it indicates that she lived with her grandmother before with Daniel, before moving in with Daniel and his mom. And so he went and spoke to Maleyha beforehand and said, hey, are you wanting to leave? What's going on? Are you wanting to leave him? You're wanting to stay? And according to Darren, she said something to the effect, no, I got something else planned. And so I don't know how true it is. He says that's what she told him, and he left that as is. Now, part of her polygraph stuff is the disappearance aspect. So she passed that. She's not lying. So I just think that I think there's a good possibility some he's seeing things that he wants to see in those scenarios. And so he's gotten suspicious of her, and he thinks that because they had applied for something to do with status on the reservation, and that as soon after they went missing, their status was cleared, but not for Meadow. And so he felt that was something there, and so that they possibly are on the reservation, taken by CPS from the reservation and Maleyha, with Maleyha's help. And it doesn't make sense to me, to be honest. And I'm not trying to say what he's saying is wrong. I mean, he's got, there's some things that he's connecting there that look suspicious, but if you're a government entity of the reservation, CPS, for instance, and you have Maleyha who's got custody of her kids, the biological father hasn't been in the life, why go through this elaborate thing when all she has to do is just sign some paperwork for them to go pick up the kids? So to me, it doesn't make any sense. The extent of the elaborate hoax, and they think that maybe perhaps, and I say they because he's not the only one. There's a few people that have reached out to me who are close to this case, who live in the area, who know these people, who are related to either Maleyha or Daniel, who believe that that maybe perhaps law enforcement is aware and that they know, and that's why it's considered still a missing person. But to me, I'm like, if they knew where the kids were, then they're not missing anymore. And I doubt that CPS would allow an expensive, exhaustive investigation into things just to hold up an elaborate thing just to pick them up. So to me, it doesn't make any sense. I don't hold any water to those type of things, that some government entity from the reservation chose to do something like this versus simply having her sign some paperwork. You get what I'm saying? Did Earl let them search his property? According to the document, I don't know if it was the documents or if it was the article that indicated, there was an article that indicated that he did allow. All righty, guys. Well, football's already started, and I'm not seeing many. What was the wrench over the door? Bears? That's what it was said was for the Bears, and apparently there was a picture of at least one bear on May 28th that was in the area that's fairly large. So it does seem like they were dealing with a bear at the time. But all right, guys, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, ring the notification bell. I'll be back on tomorrow night at some time. You won't be disappointed with what we talk about tomorrow. I'm not sure what it'll be, but I guarantee you're not going to be disappointed by it. With that being said, guys, I'll see you guys next time. Peace out. Yes, we're missing football. I'm about to go watch. I'm not an Eagles fan, but I'm going for the Eagles this time.